The head of the Ukrainian military is acknowledging the situation in Kharkiv is looking difficult. But is Russia's real strategy becoming clear? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. So, when we look at the overall combat map, we haven't yet had an update. And scrolling through kind of some of the open source stuff on Twitter, it's not clear that there are any additional villages that have been seized. Russia is claiming control over Krasne, Morokovets, and Olikovne, but as well as, I believe, this Hashishe. Sorry for the pronunciations. Why does Russia only invade villages that are very hard to pronounce? But the overall situation is not the sort of stunning breakthrough that we've often seen for example, the Battle of Otradina, where Russian forces really did kind of surge through along this rail line. And I think the reason we look on Twitter, at least according to this source, which is purportedly a Ukrainian woman who has been reporting for some time, she says the situation in Kharkiv gets more complicated, that Russia is bringing in more and more forces into the territory. Infantry, she says, is constantly entering, advancing in groups to populated areas and trying to gain a foothold to saturate the area and then keep moving forward. She says it's only a small amount of equipment, artillery, and aviation, but a large number of UAVs and electronic warfare are present as support. So I think that's really, really interesting because usually, right, if we look at the fighting in Otradina, you see that Russia was using a lot of armored forces and was much sparser or the ratio of infantry to armor was more balanced. And now we're seeing an infantry heavy fight. And on one hand, this kind of makes sense just for the terrain, as we've talked about. If your goal is to conduct an armored assault sticking to major roadways, this sort of these regions where they've initiated this attack really aren't conducive to it. I mean, you can see there's almost no major roadways in the area. But when we look at ISW, I think they may have kind of cracked the code on what Russia is doing, right? And as they say, the reported sizes, ISW confirms the reported sizes of Russian elements committed to these operations show that the Russian forces are not pursuing a large-scale operation to envelop, encircle, or seize Kharkiv city, and that while they're seizing small villages, the reality is that there's only a limited number of combat power that they've committed, right? It says here Ukrainian forces have destroyed just 20 Russian armored vehicles, which is actually pretty small. And Russian forces, again, say that the offensive is primarily heavy infantry assaults, right? So infantry sort of plussed up a little bit. But what's most interesting is that these infantry assaults, while they're not going to be able to get into Kharkiv city, right? We could take a look at the map here and say that to get even to the outskirts of Kharkiv is still 25 kilometers, right? And you can imagine if you had to hike 25 kilometers, it would take you it'd probably take you like a day if you were a decent hiker. But expecting light infantry to cover all this terrain is unrealistic. But that's not the goal. As ISW points out, that the near term, these light infantry forces can seize positions within tube artillery range of Kharkiv city. And that, I think, is most interesting, right? Because we know that tube artillery, you can hit targets within about 25 kilometers, or about 20 kilometers. So if they can just get down to here, down just past Lukyantsy and Hilboka, right, you could see that they might actually be able to start to at least pepper Kharkiv city with artillery fire. Now, if their goal is to get to downtown Kharkiv, it's going to be a bit more challenging. They're going to have to get probably a little past Leipzig into this Boshkova. But if they can do it, they can establish a support by fire position that can then support additional, more, we'll say, heavier armored assaults, right? And artillery positions may be able to support provide fire support, right, to maybe a more robust armored effort that's actually going to come from this area here, right, along this major roadway, where instead of relying on lightning assaults, it's literally going to just be infantry, armored forces supported by artillery. Because you can see if they can get to Boshkova, they'll be able to provide fire support to any force that literally crosses the border and be able to provide, again, artillery support all the way to downtown Kharkiv. That, I think, might be Russia's actual objective in this, is to establish sort of a network of fire bases and logistics that are going to support the main assault. That may also be why Ukraine is somewhat less committed to this a robust defense here, right? There's some reporting that actually Ukraine never really manned these villages for defenses, right? That they deliberately maintained a buffer zone between Russian sovereign territory and their more robust forces, simply to not hand Russia easy targets for them to shell from their own territory where Ukraine may or may not have been able to return fire. So I'm not sure this is as bad as it sounds. But again, Ukraine's military chief has something different to say. Now, if you guys need a little bit of a boost, right? Hopefully you're not under fire by the Russians, but you want to get to the gym after work, you're feeling kind of burned out. You want to check out Strike Gum. Strike Gum is inspired by my time in Afghanistan, where I had to get my caffeine on patrol by drinking gross military issue energy drinks. Strike Gum solves that problem. In this pack, each piece contains as much caffeine as a Red Bull or an Amp Energy, right? And there's 5 in this pack. It's sugar-free. It has 100 milligrams alpha GPC and 90 milligrams of caffeine in every single piece. So if you're interested, check it out at strikegum.com. That's where you can get your military discounts, your veteran discounts. But if you're on Amazon, you can go to amazon.com and order some as well. So check it out, Strike Gum. We've seen basically about 1 in 3 people now that have ordered Strike Gum have reordered, which is phenomenal for any kind of gum product. So again, a huge thank you to the dozens of people that left us 5-star reviews on Amazon, and check us out, strikegum.com or Strike Gum on Amazon. Okay, so let's take a look at this statement from Ukraine's military chief, who has said that, quote, units of the defense forces are fighting fierce battles and the attempts of Russian invaders to break through our lines have been stopped, is what Siersky claims on the Telegram app. But Russia is still assessing that it's seizing new villages, so it's tough to say. He says, quote, the situation is difficult, but the defense forces of Ukraine are doing everything to hold defensive lines and positions and inflict damage on the enemy, which are 2 different statements, right? This statement is that the attempt to break through our defenses have been stopped, and the situation is difficult, but we're doing everything we can to hold defensive positions, right? Doing everything we can to hold defensive positions is not the same thing as holding defensive positions, all right? And again, Siersky, more than anybody, willing to trade space for time. The problem is that I think they really don't want to see Russian forces advance close enough to get in artillery range of a city like Kharkiv. The Ukrainian spokesperson is saying that Russia, of course, trying to conduct actions on 2 fronts, trying to force the Ukrainian military to make impossible choices between defending in the north and defending attacks in the east. And And as they've identified, they actually say that the two Russian targets are Vovchansk and Lipsy, which tracks with, again, my analysis, where Lipsy is fairly south and not that large a town, but very crucial, like we said, likely where they're going to try to establish a fire base in order to shell Kharkiv city. And Vovchansk may just be a kind of distraction. It's not. I'm not sure this Vovchansk is really going, or possibly they're going to use Vovchansk as like an anchor to hold, to try to kind of lock Ukrainian forces in between these rivers. This may be literally just a spoiling attack, right, or a feint, where a smaller number of forces are here when the real thrust is meant to come down here. That would kind of track, right? Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you. A huge thank you to the members of combatvetnews.com. Be sure to hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, let the YouTube algorithm know I'm making good content, and I will see you guys in the next one. Cheers.